kick off. Let us kick off with 28 years later. The big thing we've all seen, whatever you want to call it, legacy sequel or whatever. I think that's the term that they use for it nowadays. So, seeing as we've all done this, I'm going to give us a timer. 15 minutes should be enough for us to rant, but let's start off with a little bit of what this film's about. So, 28 days later, people might remember this. This was released in, God knows, I cannot remember. It would have been
2002.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. 2002. It was released in 2002. It was famous. It was directed by Danny Boyle, written by Alex Garland. It was famous for having shots of Cillian Murphy, who nobody knew. That was pretty much the first thing that Cillian Murphy had done, like the most high-profile thing he'd done up to that point. His first leading role, I think. Walking through a deserted London, and everybody was going, how the heck did they do that? It also introduced the world to Naomi Harris, all that kind of stuff. And there was a 28 weeks later, as Sharon has mentioned, there was 28 weeks later that was made a couple of years ago after that didn't have their involvement in it. And now they've come back to it with 28 years later. And the whole idea is that this is not a zombie horde, it's not a zombie apocalypse. It's just very similar to a zombie apocalypse with these things called the infected, because it comes out of a lab when they tried something on monkeys, and then it gets into the blood and it makes people into these rage-afflicted beings. And by this time, there's 28 years into the whole thing. You are introduced to a conclave or a group, a hamlet called who live in something called Holy Island, which is an island off the coast of somewhere in Newcastle.
Lindisfarne.
What's that?
The Isle of Lindisfarne.
Oh, Lindisfarne. Okay, cool. And when it comes to the geography of the UK, I will always take your word for it, Sharon. and so they live on this thing, and it's only accessible through like what's the word? Like a pathway, a causeway. Yeah, when the tide is low, and that's how they sort of keep themselves safe. But every now and then they go out onto the mainland to get supplies or everything like that. And then there's almost this rite of passage that you see. You meet this kid who's called Spike, and he goes on a rite of passage with his dad, who's played by Aaron Taylor Johnson, to the mainland. And it's like, you're going to go kill your first infected. You're going to go figure out how to survive out in the wild and all that kind of stuff. And that is generally how the film starts. And then that's the basic thing of it. So as you can imagine, he goes onto the line. They go into the mainland. Stuff doesn't exactly go according to plan, and things go on. And I don't want to say much more because I mean it's 20 years later. You know what you're coming for. I just want to jump straight into what did you guys think about this? What did you guys think about it? I'm going to start with Sharon. Sharon,
2 points just to start off with.
Yeah.
The 28 years later is 28 years on from the first film, and so it's not our timeline, it's the timeline from 2002.
Yeah.
Because some of the characters you see, some of the events you see are 28 years on from 2002. And obviously, because it's not zombieism, it's not The Walking Dead.
No.
It's a virus, and viruses mutate.
Yeah.
And so we saw that in 28 weeks later, which is like the link between the films.
Yeah.
Because the virus, you start to see the mutations appear in 28 weeks later. So obviously by 28 years later, the virus has mutated and mutated again and mutated again. So what we're seeing is not the same virus as we saw in the first film because it has mutated. Because it was largely died out, and then it was the mutation sort of sparked it off again after 28 weeks later. So you see all these different mutations.
Yeah, I think it's quite funny the way they kind of do the thing. You know how like when they released the Halloween movies the new Halloween movies a couple of years ago, and they kind of went, everything after the first Halloween is rubbish. And they don't quite do this. They do acknowledge the fact that the events of 28 weeks later happen. But there's almost kind of like a hand wave that go, yeah, that was supposed to, but no. Now we're getting back to what we're interested in. This is a British story set on the British Isles. We're going to stay within this thing. It affects us and nobody else.
So the whole thing about the first one was like, they're just going to starve to death.
Yeah.
And yet they largely did starve to death. And then 28 weeks later happened, and that made the virus evolve. And so the infected that we saw originally.
Okay.
That are consumed by red. But yeah, apart from that were my comments I wanted to raise in the get-go.
Yep.
And I know there are a few things that Shawnee is dying to say, so I'm going to let Shawnee go.
324, I think.
I'm just like I can feel that, how you got that when your dog is really biting it, like another dog.
No, I'm fine. I'm just listening to everybody.
But Sean, we know you're ready. We know you're ready. You're coiled.
So it's like, I don't know, Shawnee.
Okay, so
Go for
Sean,
it. You have
Sean,
our blessing.
Sean, go for it. What did you think of this film?
Well, yeah. So the first half an hour, three quarters of an hour, yeah, that's okay. We could go with that. I quite liked it, and I did even quite like the shots between the old Henry V stuff and all that. I quite liked
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
I quite
The
liked.
way
I
the way
thought
the
that was
film is
quite effective.
the way the film is made is quite
Yeah,
weird sometimes because
yeah,
they keep having these cuts between World War II footage and like Henry the Laurence Olivier version that he made film, and
yeah.
they keep cutting between that and now, and I was never
And there
entirely
are
sure.
scenes from 28 weeks later they've cut in as well.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. That's
In
Mm.
that
and the thing,
montage, there's 28 weeks
and
later.
I was never sure exactly what kind of parallel they were trying to make there, but I was like, okay, that's interesting. I don't exactly know what that is, but yeah. But anyway, Sean, carry on. So
So yeah, so I
the
was
first,
so okay. I was cool with that personally, and the rest of the stuff. Yeah, I could understand what's going on in the community, but I don't think that certain people that went off would have survived for a start. I don't think they had enough. Would have had enough. Would have had enough
I
knowledge,
had
enough knowledge and everything else to last. For
I
one
had an
thing,
issue with that as well. Yes,
I just don't think they would have managed to do what they did. And
yeah, I had
then
an issue with that.
they meet somebody who's obviously been hiding for 28 years and
Yeah,
has had no, so he's been 28. He says, "Oh, I haven't seen anybody for 13 years," and then he nearly gets caught for all those years. And I mean, it's just stupid. Why would he put himself in that situation if he survived? He nearly didn't. Do you know what I mean? So
yeah.
I thought that's just bad. That's just really really bad. So yeah, so I had quite a lot of issues with that. I didn't quite like the idea. I wouldn't have thought you'd have had the European powers isolating the place. I just didn't get that. And then there's a bit on the train where you know exactly what's going to happen. So you know
Yeah.
from this movement, you know
Yeah.
exactly
That,
where
that was telegraphed.
you
That
know,
was
you thought,
absolutely
oh,
telegraphed.
I can
Yeah,
see what's going to happen here. I can see what's going to happen here. It wasn't even subtle. Do you know what I mean?
I agree. I agree with you. It was
So and I think if you got trained again, I come back to this thing. When trained, and perhaps they weren't that well trained, they might have only been Coast Guard or something. But when you've got trained professional military people, they don't panic in situations like that, and they'd handle that situation so much more better. I'm sorry, I just think that.
well. I think with that, I mean that particular character you're talking about, they did give a little bit of backstory to him as to why he ended up in the military and everything like that. Which yeah, but and I agree because it's kind of like how Sharon is saying. Sharon is saying like, okay, no, but the virus is mutated. I feel like there's this film kept throwing up things that I was like, okay, hang on a second, that's stupid. And then you have to go and get like some other explanation, like a footnote that goes, but if you look at this, that could work. Like, for instance, the one bit I had is there's the bit where they go to an abandoned petrol station. And they go to an abandoned petrol station, and there is something that has to do with igniting gas that I'm like, okay, I'm like, Alex Garland is quite a meticulous writer, and Danny Boyle's quite a meticulous director. So I'm sure that possibly or theoretically is possible, but I don't understand how they're walking out of there.
No, I felt much the same.
I was like, I mean, they do, and I'm sorry if you haven't watched the film. If you haven't watched the film, we're just probably like sounding like idiots. But like they make a very, very definite choice of showing you where the gas is. They make a very of showing you they make it very clear this is where the gas is. But I'm still kind of like, yeah, but I don't know. And and there were just things in this film that just kept going. And I guess you need people to be stupid in films. I guess you need people to be stupid in films for things to happen. But there were just many times I was like, why? Oh, fuck. Like, okay, sure, you're talking about somebody being ill-equipped to go on the journey that they went on, right? You're talking about someone being ill. And there's one particular bit where they're sleeping. There's a bit where they're sleeping. And I'm like, after what happened to you earlier in the film, why are you sleeping on that level? I mean, I don't care how inexperienced you are.
How stupid are you?
Yeah, I don't care how experienced you are. You lived through something that told you that what you're doing right now is a dumb ass idea. Yeah. Why are you doing it?
It is because he is the most insufferable character imaginable. And I spent the entire film wishing ill on him.
Well done, Holly. Yeah, I can totally see where you're coming from there, mate. Totally.
Everything is just like you are selfish, you are self-involved. This is a decision being made that purely focuses on your needs and your personal preferences and what you think will make your life better. You give so few expletives about anybody who is not you and your immediate experience of life that frankly you should be eaten by a bloody zombie.
And the thing is, and that,
I would clap.
The thing is, I would be okay with that, but I don't think they sketched that out enough, because it didn't come across as like, if they're giving you something that said this is just a totally self-centered character. Like okay, Robert Carlyle in the beginning of 28 Weeks Later, I think that they've done a better job of sketching out how self-centered that character is in the short time that he has there than they did with this character, because it just ended up being stupid. It just ended up looking stupid, and the motivation for what kicks off the second half of the film, quite frankly, the motivation, I'm kind of like, that is paper thin. It is really paper thin too. And I understand that you might have been isolated and you don't understand a whole bunch of things and people haven't told you stuff and people have been lying to you your whole life, but it still seems to me very paper thin to go and do this big, massive, stupid thing.
Yeah, it's like you're a very stupid person.
Very
stupid person.
That even you
doing
yourself,
it very slowly.
Because up until that point, they haven't shown that character to be stupid. But for the plot to move forward, he has to do something incredibly stupid.
Yes.
I'm just kind of like, I want to be with you, I want to go along with you, but I'm having serious trouble here. I really can't go along with this. And
He should have got eaten by the zombies. Just saying.
Then
what's Sharon's thoughts?
And the thing about that is also, one final thing I will say, because we do have to move on, before we go to, is throughout the whole thing, I'm not sure if you guys realized that they're planning to make a trilogy of this film.
Yeah,
I didn't until afterwards.
And they've actually filmed and completed the second film, which is called The Bone Temple. So it's going to be all about the Bone Temple, which I think might be quite interesting, because that bit I thought was quite interesting. That bit of film I thought was quite interesting. Yeah, and but about half of it, I was kind of like, they're obviously not going to resolve this. It's like, obviously, and I think, but having said that, I do feel as if they did a good job. It wasn't as egregious as some things, where it's like, come back for the sequel. They did a good job of wrapping up a story and then saying, but there's another story to be told. And I'm talking about two things, about the ending of the film and the beginning of the film. The beginning of the film is mad. It is absolutely mad. I mean, I've never seen many films that start off with the Teletubbies, then go places, all that kind of stuff. And then that Teletubby thing is kind of links to the end. But anyway, so Sharon, we'll let you have the final word on this before we go to star ratings.
There's a few the glaring things obvious. I think we've already mentioned one. I would call one thing the diversion, and I'm thinking, you've potentially obviously endangered everybody in your community.
Yes,
by your
exactly. This is why he should be eaten by zombies.
I was so like,
essentially, to do is like, there are consequences to actions like that, and it's like, are you not even aware of the society in which you live? By your diversion is just potentially killed 500 people in the next film. I don't know.
Selfish, self-involved child.
Yeah,
that should be eaten.
I was.
Ladies are going.
There was another thing I would call like the time lag, in that there's a scene where people are making their escape and you've got a zombie like climbing the stairs basically, and you're like 3 steps ahead of it, and then there's like a time jump, and I'm thinking, in my head I was thinking, okay, most houses have like 13 steps. If you're running, how fast does it take you to get from the bottom of the stairs to the top of the stairs, and then how long then does it take you to climb a ladder, open something, close something, and then lie in silence? How long does it take you to do that? And do those two events correspond? So I was thinking, there's a sort of a time lag halfway up the stairs there to allow that to happen. So I think some of those things were a bit too convenient, because it's like, we want to have that cutaway, and it's like, oh.
Yeah, I feel like there's some bits where it's like, they're going for something realistic almost. So because there's bits of it that almost sort of like Ken Loachian or something like that. And then at some points they kind of go, oh, we remember we're making a film, and because we're making a film, film logic takes over.
Yeah, I mean, there's bits I really like. There's some bits where I'm thinking, okay, about how the virus has evolved, I thought, okay, I can see how some of this could happen. So that I was quite pleased with that. But I must admit, the end scene, I think, was a complete, to me, was
We've got Snow White and the Huntsman with all them dwarfs on springs and things.
Yeah, well, when you get the last bit with, I'm only going to say one word, tracksuits.
Yes.
Yeah.
When I got that last bit, I was a bit like, because when you first see this, you sort of go, that looks just like.
Yes. Yeah.
And I'm thinking, surely they can't all be dressed like that person.
Yeah.
And then afterwards, it's like they are. So in my head, I was like, whoa, I don't know where they're going with that.
Well, I mean, I think
for the British audience, that's immediately going to be going bing, 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 bing.
Yeah, to be honest with you, because I didn't grow up here, it didn't immediately occur to me when I saw that bit. I was just kind of like thinking, this is all weird. And it was later on that you were like, oh, okay, yeah, I get it. I see what they're doing there. And it only occurred to me later.
In 2002, the things that we knew later did not.
Exactly.
Weren't known.
So within the world,
where are they going with that?
Within the world of the film, it makes sense. It makes sense, but in the world of the people who have to watch the film, it jars. But okay, how many stars would we give this?
Can I also add that I also was waiting for it to finish for quite a lot of the film. I kind of felt it dragged.
I agree with you. I do think that it dragged. I mean, the second half of the film is definitely slower than the first, and it's like, okay, get on with it. Where are we going? Get on with it. And it's less than 2 hours, and it's a bit. But anyway, how many stars would we give it?
Who's going first?
I'll go first.
Okay.
Yeah, 3.
Sean?
Yeah, for me, it's a low 3. The first half hour, 3/4 of an hour, but it's a low 3 for me.
Sharon?
I think it's flawed. I mean, my initial assessment was I enjoyed it, actually. They are flawed.
Yeah.
And I think some of the flaws are quite large ones. But I actually found it, I was engaged with it because I was in that zone. I did the triple that week. So to me, I was in the zone. So my first assessment was a 4. So I'm thinking I may sort of downgrade that to a high 3 because I still think it has an entertainment value. I still think it's got some interesting things to say. And when you look at like post-apocalypse of any type of things, how people envision the future is really interesting to me. It's like what aspects of society do you think we're going to be surviving, and what aspects do you think will just fade away? And I think obviously they're telling you a story about why certain aspects have survived, why they have certain songs, why they have certain images, and it's sort of obviously speaking into a certain demographic. And obviously they're making a judgment on that. But so I thought it made me think, well, that's an interesting thing about what survives. So I thought that was enough to make me overlook and be more generous towards some of the flaws in the film. So I would say, to me, it was a high 3.
I think very similar to you, Sharon. When I finished watching, I thought, that's probably a 4. I didn't enjoy watching it, but it's probably a 4. But I think the more I think about it, I'm coming down to a 3. Because, I'm coming down to a 3 because, I mean, there were bits where I did not like the tension. I did not like the dread. I don't enjoy being, but I think that's just because the film was effective at doing that. And there were bits where it was really effective at building up the dread. But then something would happen that would be like, hang on, but isn't that stupid? and then there were things like when somebody shows the kid a phone, those are things that you're like, oh yeah, that would happen. That is, yeah. But hey, okay, so I'll give it a 3.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I think we better move on.
Yeah, we better move on because we have stuff to get to. Okay.